I do apologize about that little faux pas, the joys of tech when you're trying to press buttons, talk, and someone then sends an email that covers the button that you need to press all at the same time, which just says it's live. So thank you very much for joining me today. This, of course, is going to be going out again and again. I am really privileged to introduce a friend of mine, which is Mr. Peter Baum. He says, as I'm reaching for my mobile phone so I can read the details. So I'm just going to bring on Peter, and then we will get into a very, very important discussion with him. Peter.
Morning to you, Mark.
Thank you. It's lovely to see you, and thank you so much for it's all happening my end. Something's just fallen down. There we go. It's live. As we record this, Peter, thank you so much for joining me at this moment, and it's
thanks for having me, Mark. My pleasure and privilege.
Thank you. I just want to read this out to introduce everyone to Peter. It's one of the important things that we have the technology, we can do that. Peter Baum, editor, International Political Affairs to Blitz, is a researcher, scholar who writes extensively on Israel, Holocaust, Zionism, Middle East, anti-Semitism, and other issues. Peter Baum has worked for 4 decades in the international financial markets, specializing in the capital market. He held directorships at large international financial institutions and ended career as a consultant to an investment management company. Baum is a member of the Institute of Directors. He has worked extensively abroad in Asia, Africa, the USA, and Europe. And after retirement, spends his time as a political researcher, activist, and columnist. In addition to this, his engagement with Blitz, Peter Baum has, the joys of mobile phone, has also been writing for the Gatestone Institute, Conservative Women, and Decisive Liberty, and has appeared numerous times on TV, radio, and mainly talking about Israel and the Middle East. Peter, officially, welcome again, and thank you for bringing your important voice to my report. And I'm very grateful for that. Peter, I want to share a picture. You've recently written an article about this. We have seen since the pogrom of October the 7th, we have seen marches on the streets up and down this country and all over the world that in many ways have been, well, they're shocking. I've been very shocked by that. But on the other hand, people who have known what's been going on within the education system, within universities, etc., are not surprised. And we have to discuss this axis, the combination of the left and Islamism. So I just want to put up this picture, what was in a recent article that you have just published. Now, this picture, I just want you to explain, because the history of that flag and the ideology that is behind this, and where this ideology wishes to take us. Your thoughts, sir?
Okay, so what we're seeing today is a very successful culmination of years of anti-Jewish state demographics combining together to where we are at the moment. We see protests on our streets and anti-Semitism rocketing, whereby Jews in the United Kingdom feel very threatened. Now, we haven't quite got to the stage of 1930s Nazi Germany, but if we don't do something about it, we will get to that stage. There's been huge amounts of money funding extremist groups, not only in the United Kingdom, but all over Europe and in America as well. They've attracted, paradoxically, members of what I would call the far left, whereas years ago, as history tells us, it was always the far right that were eager to jump on the anti-Semitic bandwagon, but it's certainly now members of the far left. And that combination of very far left extremists on the fringes of what the Labour Party and Islamic extremism are a toxic combination, not only for Jewish people, but for all morally decent people. And I'm including that people who really believe in Judeo-Christian values. And that's not to take anything away from the patriotic Hindu or Sikh communities in our country. But there is a toxic combination of the moment of far left extremism and Islamic extremism. Now, the latter, unfortunately, every day of the week is being facilitated and encouraged in our education system. That's reached a head as we speak this week, Mark, where a teacher, a school has needed to suspend operations because of the extremism of the certain section of the Islamic community. And I don't see any members of the Islamic community, whether it's in mainstream media or on the fringes, actually standing up and saying, "Hey guys, this is wrong." I don't see those voices of moderation, and therefore it's up to people like me. I'm called extreme right, Mark, simply because I challenge the narrative and the actions of the extreme left. I'm called fascist. I'm called Hitlerite. I'm called, as I say, far right. All these slurs and accusations, and everyone else in my paradigm is simply because we are challenging what we see as being extremism on the far left and the extreme Islamic members in the United Kingdom. So it's very uncomfortable at the moment. We've seen anti-Semitic incidents rocket since October the 7th, because Israel is the one country in the world that has the unification factor whereby anti-Semites on all sides can unite. It's very strange, Mark. If we look at what's happened in Syria, where over 600,000 Muslims, including, may I add, about 7,000 Palestinians, in the last decade have been slaughtered. Nearly 3 million people displaced into Iraq and northern Syria and refugee camps. But we don't see protests in the streets, or thank God we don't see members of the Muslim community targeted because of the actions of the Syrians. It's only when the only Jewish state in the world gets in front of mainstream media, which I have to say, I think it has an anti-Jewish state bias, especially on the BBC, especially in CNN, and Al Jazeera might as well be the public relations arm for Hamas.
Yeah.
But it's only the Jewish state that gets and Jews within the diaspora that get targeted because of the actions of the Jewish state of Israel. As I say, Muslims, and I thank God about this, aren't targeted because of the actions of Islamic countries, or Christians aren't targeted, again, thank God, because of the actions of, say, the Orthodox Christian community in Russia under Putin, that kind of thing. Only the Jews are targeted. Now, because this anti-Semitism has gained momentum, something really has to be done about it. I was quite encouraged, perversely, when Jeremy Corbyn was running against Boris Johnson in the last election. The Conservative Party won by an overwhelming majority, not because everyone loved Boris, but because the white working class, the red wall, the people that had fought against, also whose parents had fought against fascism, identified Jeremy Corbyn as being someone who was eagerly comfortable with Islamic and Irish terrorism. Although the social media post would say, oh, it was a Zionist plot, it was an establishment plot to get it out. It wasn't that at all. It was because Mr. Corbyn had associated himself historically with groups unpalatable to the British public. We're now seeing a situation where the Reform Party are gaining increasing momentum according to the polls. And I believe come the next election, this one party, who more than any other party is trying to challenge Islamic and far left extremism, I think will do quite well, not because of disaffected conservative voters, but actually because of working class people in those areas which they see Islamism as being a threat to them. So that's encouraging. And for the first time in my lifetime, Mark, there are now two UK broadcasters, GB News and Talk TV, which are there. They're called right wing, but they're not. All they're doing is challenging extremism, and they're deemed to be right wing. So that's encouraging, but I do feel that much more needs to be done. And I would like to see moderate Muslim voices, and I have to say I don't, challenge the extremists, certainly in the Muslim MPs in Parliament, certainly what's going on in our universities and what's going on in our streets.
Very, very well said, because as you raise the incidents in schools, we've got the wonderful headmistress that on a TV show is called, and I've forgotten her name, I apologize, but is called, the toughest headmistress of the UK. Absolutely excellent. And she is being taken to court because she banned prayer inside the school, and when it's being pushed for Islamic prayer, etc. She's not just picking out that. I think she's just banned it across the board in regard to being able to take the school forward, good relationships within the school. And then it comes out that the individual that is taking her to court has threatened the school or was expelled for behaviour, I believe. Then there's another incident in East London where the school was saying we may have to shut down because of the protest in regard to people that attended that school, in regard to Islamism, etc. Again, if we then go around the world, as I am listening to something that's been happening in Australia, a country that you know a lot about, that there's meetings of people saying, well, how can we use the curriculum to push forward the Palestinian cause, to attack Israel and all the rest? I mean, we would never have seen that. And then it raises this whole thing of the distance within young people. Are they actually taught about the Holocaust? Do they actually understand what this was about, which was 6 million people? Let's put them in gas chambers and annihilation. This is history. And then this whole thing of revisionist history. Now, I actually stood in a gas chamber in Auschwitz in 1986, and it's something that has never, ever left me. Tom Slater, who does incredible work on Spike, did a fantastic podcast a few weeks ago where he explained wonderfully the combination of Islamism with the left. Then Melanie Phillips, brilliant Melanie Phillips, of course, wrote her book, London Star. And then we discover who is over here. And as the incredible Douglas Murray has also pointed out, that Mohammed Swaleh, who was involved with the military wing of Hamas, is then living in North London, I believe, then part of or the Muslim Association. His son is then running that, etc., etc. They then combine with the Stop the War campaign, as Tom Slater has laid out, to facilitate all these marches. How historically have we got here in regard to the basically it's Arafat? What did he do in manipulating that and bringing the left together with Islam? What has happened there historically?
Yeah, a couple of things there, Mark, which I haven't got the full answers, but this will go some way in explaining it. After the Holocaust, there was a global wave of sympathy for the Jewish people. Of that, there's no doubt. Whether it was guilt, that it would never happen again, etc., etc. It didn't take too long. We're talking about 1967 until the world started siding on this newly formed creation known as the Palestinians, created by the KGB in 67 to challenge Jews and the only Jewish state in the world. And it didn't take too long for the victims, it all changed round. The Jews who were victims of the Holocaust all of a sudden became the perpetrators of being aggressors against this newly formed demographic known as the Palestinian people. And mainstream media, which veered from centre to the left, has undoubtedly facilitated this growth industry. There has been no doubt in my mind that the most influential media broadcaster in the world, the BBC, since the late 60s and following through to the day, has knowingly facilitated an agenda that was definitely anti-Jewish state, probably anti-Semitic, and they have indoctrinated and encouraged 2 generations now of people to mock and have contempt for Judeo-Christian values. When I was growing up, Mark, on a Sunday morning, the first thing that I could hear was church bells ringing. I've lived in the same area apart from when I worked abroad, but we don't hear that on a Sunday morning in my area now. No church bells, but I do hear the sound of Muslims praying. I think this country has been too tolerant in tolerating the intolerant, if that makes sense. We've allowed ourselves to get into a position whereby those who detest Judeo-Christian values, who are rabidly anti-Semitic, who want to ignore British history, British patriotism, but are quite happy to take everything this country so generously gives to them, have nothing but contempt for this company. And unfortunately, the BBC, the world's most influential broadcaster, has knowingly facilitated and helped those people who hold the UK and Judeo-Christian values in such contempt. That's how I think we've got there. Universities too have become a hotbed in facilitating such hatred. Unfortunately, our laws in this country should be sufficient to bring those to task for behaving in such a way that our parents would have been shocked in, but they don't. And I don't know whether it's a combination of lawyers who are too clever by half, assisted by the media, a police force that is, hey, hands off, we don't want to rock the boat here, and members of parliament that are seeing how their constituencies are created, that want to get nothing more than be voted in rather than expressing the will of the silent majority. And unless the silent majority actually starts protesting in a way, and I don't mean in a way that's going to be as violent or extreme as the opposition, but in a way that makes their voice heard. And I'm hoping, Mark, that at the next election, a party like Reform, who, on the basis of how our system works, hasn't got a snowball's chance in hell of getting MPs voted in. But if that dynamic could possibly change, then I think the silent majority have a chance. Something happened just last week, Mark, that too many people aren't aware of. In a local by-election in Hackney, which has a predominantly Muslim and black and Labour voting population, a Conservative councillor won a by-election, completely hidden from our screens. You had the BBC, I don't think, even reported on it, not even on the local news. But a Conservative councillor got into a ward, which is, as you know, Diane Abbott's constituency, and won a seat from Islamic and left-wing opposition. It was quite remarkable. So, I had to look twice at this. If that paradox was repeated nationally through the ballot box, I think that's the way we're going to do it. But from what I see on our TV screens, from what I see on the protests and marches, I think Jewish people and conservative Christian people are going to be continuously targeted, not only by the extremists, but by the lack of support, and in fact mocking, we get from mainstream media.
I couldn't agree with you more. And the classic thing that's said, sadly, is that first we get the Saturday people, and then we go for the Sunday people, and that what people do not understand is that they are coming for Judeo-Christian civilization, for culture. That's what's going on here. And as we know, the incredible Douglas Murray, Melanie Phillips, etc., have been writing about this, and also Karen Harradine as well, within wonderful work she does within the Conservative Woman, writing about this. And I think, as much as this may be uncomfortable to some, the events of the 7th of October pogrom last year meant that suddenly people are having to face the realization of this and have discussions that they need to have. We need to be able to talk about this and go, individuals have been warning about this for a long, long time. And I will mention someone's name that may be unpopular in various circles, but people like Tommy Robinson have been talking about this for a long time. And I think credit has to go where credit's due, and we see what they have done, the establishment has done to him, etc. Sorry, I apologize.
No, carry on.
I was going to say that when we look at the writings of Bataillon and understanding the whole immigration process and the way that the European Union, in regard to politically, has then aligned itself with Arabism, now whether that is for oil, etc., then also we then go back historically in 1962, where France literally overnight withdraw from Algeria after fighting a war of India. The Algerian independence were fighting for their independence with France for, I think, 7 years. And this whole mindset of colonialism and all the rest, and then making those accusations to Israel, people not understanding history, how things have actually come about, no understanding of the makeup of Israel, because there are Jews from all over the world, and also not an understanding of the expulsion of Jewish people from Middle Eastern countries, and then the makeup of their skin color, etc., etc. So people do not know this. They don't want to understand this at all. Peter, sorry, I'm going to stop.
No, Mark,
Let you.
you're absolutely correct, and I'm going to just expand upon a couple of things you said. The first thing is, when we take someone like Tommy Robinson, to the establishment, to the media, he has been perceived to be someone we can't touch, and people have held him in contempt. But actually, if you look back at what he was saying some years ago, he's been nothing but pragmatic. People might not like the way he said it or what he did, but actually his understanding of what was happening should have been more widely broadcast, and then maybe we wouldn't be where the situation we're in today. And I can see that he is growing in popularity, having the establishment having tried to keep him down. That's the first thing. Second thing I want to say is how disappointed I have been, and how all morally decent people have been, with our church, I say this, our church leaders and leaders within the Jewish community. Very, very disappointed. They haven't had the spine, I would say, to challenge and to say what needs to be said. They've been too tolerant of tolerating the intolerant. And I would like to see our church leaders and our Jewish leaders be much more dynamic. I'd like to see them express themselves in the same way as when an imam is being interviewed by the BBC. He goes hell for leather in expressing his support for Islam, his people, having contempt for the Jewish state of Israel, for Judeo-Christian values. I want to see our church leaders as strong as the imams that are being interviewed on TV. And there's one other thing, Mark, which I just, for the life of me, I can't understand. Have been a student of the Palestinians and their cause and their agenda for the best part of 20 years now. And to this day, the Palestinians have two charters which are both taught or have been taught in UNRWA, United Nations Works and Refugee Agency schools, and part of the Palestinian education system. The first charter is dated 1968 and is still current, from the Palestinian National Council. And the second charter dated 1988, which is a Palestinian Hamas charter. And again, I repeat this for the sake of the audience. Both charters are still taught as part of the Palestinian education system. And both charters demand not only extermination of Jews, but subservience to Islam of all other religions. That's part and parcel of the Palestinian education system. So we've now had 3 generations, possibly 4 generations of Palestinian children indoctrinated into that philosophy. Is it any wonder? Oh, and also that philosophy has been churned out to the Palestinian diaspora for the last 30, 40 years. I don't understand why no one who is opposed to that is ever interviewed and points that out to a global audience. When I point it out on my social media posts or in the posts I write for Blitz, some people say, hey, I really didn't know that. And what's the source of your statements for that? And I point them to the various articles in the Palestinian charters. There's one other thing, Mark, that people don't know. In the 1988 charter, still current, there's 3 articles, 17, 22 and 28. And if I said this out in mainstream media, I'd never be allowed to go on it. Well, I'm not anyway. those articles actually call for the extermination, wait for this, I kid you not, of those, for example, assisting directly or indirectly the physically and mentally disabled, or children suffering from cancer. Now that's in the charter, the 1988 Palestinian Hamas Charter, still taught to schools today. And for the life of me, Mark, I repeat, I don't understand why. If I understand it, if I can read it, why can't people who have a far more influential voice than myself or you, why can't they express it? I'll tell you why, Mark, because they wouldn't be allowed to. And yet it's there for everyone to see in the Charter. The Palestinians are probably the most racist Islamic group that there has ever been. I just can't express it any other way. Now, there's a paradox here, Mark, as well, because my research, and this has been verified by people that won't put their head above the parapet, and I understand the reasons for not doing so, but my research also concludes that the Palestinian charters are in direct confrontation with the teachings of the Quran. They actually mock Allah and Muhammad. And what's my source for saying that? There are numerous surahs within the Quran that actually bestow, bequeath, and promise the geography we would call Israel or the Holy Land to none other than the Jewish people.
Yes.
The Palestinians aren't even mentioned in the Quran. So whichever way you look at the Palestinian cause or agenda, their hatred for Judaism, their contempt and hatred for other religions and races, the charters themselves, in defiance of the Quran, I don't understand how they have gained such popularity, such momentum, such support, even to the point of being the victim in all this, is beyond my comprehension. I can only trust that the what shall I say, the belief that you and I have, albeit coming from different religions, has a plan in mind to ensure that good will triumph over evil. The other thing that's interesting, Mark, is I think the political world has come to realise that the Hamas atrocities on October the 7th, which, by the way, were not the first time that the Palestinians have undertaken such an atrocity. I'll come back to that. But this evil act on October the 7th was not just an Palestinian, an extreme Islamic v. Jew event. It was also Iran against the enemies of Iran. And I think we're seeing that played out now with the way that Iranians have been manipulating the Houthis and the fight back there's been against the Houthis in Yemen. Once Israel has defeated the Hamas militarily, which they will surely do, and politically, that would be a limb of Iran cut off. And the powers that be, I think, will ensure that the Houthis will be challenged militarily to the point where perhaps half a limb of Iran is cut off. I just want to go back to the atrocities on October the 7th, because this was not the first time in history that the Palestinians have undertaken this. On January the 20th, 1976, in a Lebanese Christian village called Damour, the Palestinian militias undertook a very similar atrocity. I'm going to be I'm going to say it for what it is, Mark. Children were beheaded, women were raped, pregnant mothers had babies torn from their stomachs, acts of necrophilia, and grandparents made to watch as their grandchildren were killed by the Palestinian butchers. No one knows the exact numbers of Lebanese Christians killed. Some estimates put it as high as 4,000, other estimates go for a lower range of 700. No one knows because the event was hardly reported. But this, what happened on October the 7th, was a replica to Jewish people of what happened to Christian people on January the 20th, 1976, in that Lebanese village called Damour. So the Palestinians, even having undertaken an atrocity like that, even having supported trying to overthrow the Hashemites of Jordan in 1970, which is why they were kicked out to Lebanon, even having supported the megalomaniac Saddam Hussein against the Kuwaitis who housed, fed and clothed them for decades, the Palestinians have still managed to override all those despicable acts of barbarism and duplicity and treachery, and are still widely supported in the United Nations. It is incomprehensible to me, Mark.
Well, as Karen Harradine has written and has said, it's the Islamification of the United Nations. When you have got Middle Eastern countries with human rights records which are appalling, sitting on human rights committees, etc., this is where we're at. And I don't have to tell you, and I don't have a count, but it's exhaustive, of the amount of UN resolutions against Israel are off the chart, and this is where history is so important. But the other thing, and I will say to you respectfully as well, is that we forget there is it's the spiritual aspect of this. I passionately believe that, where scripture talks about the reforming of a country in a day. I will do that, says God. He bequeathed you that land. He bequeathed the land to the Jewish people. I think a historical discussion between you and I is and maybe we'll work this out, but this is profoundly important. And you are raising extremely important issues, because this whole thing of the Palestinian people group, right? No, there has never been that. That name is used, to then turn around and go, well, they have a right here, they have the right to return, all the rest. This is vast and it has to be talked about. But I'll just say this in regard to Lebanon, of course, and you quite rightly raised General Haig helping Jordan in 1970, and I think 25,000 Palestinians are then killed, because basically it's about overturning a country. We then look at what happened in Lebanon and the civil war in regard to a Christian country, and Lebanon kept taking refugees in, trying to be helpful. Then there's a tipping point. This is historical, and that is also what we are facing as well. If people have a mindset to Mahdi is coming back, and we need to create the caliphate and basically get into an apocalyptic mindset. The Mahdi comes back, then we can go to heaven with our 75 virgins and all the rest. I am not decrying or being rude in regard to how people think. I am trying to put over facts that at times are so difficult to understand. And I'll end with this, and quite rightly you've referred to it. In the 1930s, we know what was going on within our own government in regard to appeasement, etc., etc. And literally we were dragged to a point where we then had to respond. Am I advocating violence? No. Do I want people to be divested of a way of thinking? Of course I do. And I'll end with this, before coming back to you. When people say I am when they throw a trope at us that says, oh, you're a Zionist. Yes, I believe in the right of Israel to exist as a nation. Do you understand how that came about? Do you understand how big that nation is, which is the size of Wales or New Jersey? And do you have any understanding geographically of how many Islamic countries there are in Africa, in North Africa, where you go around that? Sudan, Egypt, etc. You're going through Libya, Morocco, Algeria, etc., Tunisia. You go through that all the way up then to Israel. You're looking at Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, etc., Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, etc. I've missed loads out, but you get the point I'm making geographically. And the other final thing I want to just say right now. When people are singing from the river to the sea, it's an extermination trope. And I say this, that as a dear friend of mine explained to me, when people are pushing for a two-state solution, we've already practiced a two-state solution. It was Gaza when Israel withdrew in 2005. The ins and outs of that are another very interesting conversation. But they withdrew, and they also dug up all the Israelis that had died in cemeteries and took all those bodies with them. Let's just say that. And personally, I don't think they should have withdrawn. That's a discussion as much as that would horrify people like Owen Jones. But this is the truth of it. They tried that. And then as soon as Hamas gets in after an election, all the PLO leaders, other opposition leaders are then thrown, they're killed, thrown off roofs or whatever. And that is then happens. And then within days, rockets start firing into Israel. And this is the situation. This is the battle that we are having. Sorry, I've spoken too long, but to get the history out there. And that is why also it becomes a very very emotive and emotional discussion, because the fact that people are prepared to sacrifice facts and history. And this is my own personal belief. This is where we're at, and we're trying to get those facts out. Peter, sorry, I've gone on too long.
Mark, you're absolutely right. And again, just reiterating some of the things you said, when it comes to the United Nations, that organisation is indeed the theatre of the absurd. Yeah. I think I did an article recently on Blitz about the number of UN resolutions over the last decade. I think there's been something like 250, of which 167 are aimed at Israel. I think that's a figure. I may be wrong, but you get the disproportionate imbalance of how the Jewish state of Israel is singled out. Going back to what you were saying about the two-state solution, why on earth should Israel put up the two-state solution when the Palestinians in the West Bank have a charter of 1968 and the Hamas in Gaza have a charter of 1988, both calling for the extermination of Jews? Why would anyone want to have a two-state solution when both Palestinian charters have that as their manifesto? It just seems absurd. And the other thing that I reiterate time and time again in my charters, many people who don't understand the history of this situation actually believe the mythology, which has morphed into facts. And I'll just end up on two things. And I've written about this extensively, Mark. The first thing is many people believe that Palestinian land was stolen, similar to the way Europeans stole land of the indigenous natives of North America. That's the first thing. And the second thing that they believe, that Israel is an illegal occupier of Palestinian land. Both those two narratives are false narratives, they're mythology, and it can be proven. The evidence is there to prove that. So just being very brief on the illegal occupation. Many of your viewers will not be aware, some will be, but many will not be, that to this day, the West Bank, or as I call it, Judea and Samaria, and Gaza under immutable international law, is within Israel's sovereign territory. What's the source for me making a statement like that, which pro-Palestinians will go, hey, what are you talking about? After the Ottoman Empire was defeated after 400 years, 1517 to 1917, the League of Nations, under the mandate system in 1922, created Mesopotamia, now called Iraq, the Lebanon, now the Republic of Lebanon, Cis and Transjordan, now called Jordan, Syria, and Palestine, now called Israel. And within those mandates, the territory bequeathed to the Jewish people, Palestine, now Israel, included, and to this day still includes, Judea and Samaria and Gaza. That was sanctioned by the United Nations in 1945, which took over the role of the League of Nations under its charter, could not change legally binding previous international law as per the legal principles of acquired rights and estoppel. And the last ruling, actually, verifying what I've just told you, was upheld by the third chamber of the Court of Versailles in 2013, which has just basically rubber stamped what I've expressed to your audience. That's a legal situation. The fact that Israel got out of Gaza and is giving areas A and B and C to the Palestinians are political moves in the hope that Israel will find peace. But under international law, Judea and Samaria and Gaza are still within Israel's sovereign territory.
Yes.
The Golan Heights is not. And although Israel occupies the Golan Heights, she does so within international law. Why? Because Syria is still at war with Israel. Although, you know, it's not a true war, she is still expressed to the UN that she is at war with Israel, and until Syria herself reverses that decision, Israel has a right to occupy the Golan Heights. So that's where we are on the legal thing. On the thing about Palestinian land was stolen, again, I'll end up with this, Mark. I know that, I know, it's a fact that there are only 5 categories of land in the area we call Palestine, Israel, the West Bank, Gaza. Those 5 categories are very simple: Mulk, Miri, Waqf, Matruka, and Miwat. Mulk is freehold, Miri is leasehold, Waqf is land owned by charitable or religious organisation, and Matruka and Miwat is state land and wasteland. When I go to any Palestinian who claims their land has been stolen, I ask them, what category of land was stolen and where and when was it land registered? And do you know what, Mark? In the 20 years that I've been asking this question, I've only received one feedback that I thought, hey, maybe I'm missing something here. And that feedback was a picture of 4 legal documents, all in Arabic, which I then had translated by a friend of mine in the Emirates, funnily enough. He said, Peter, all these are leasehold documents that expired in 1925. So no one has actually been able to challenge. Now, if someone like me, Mark, understands that, why is that not expressed by people far more influential than I in the Israeli government? Or, you know, Mark, I don't get it. I really don't.
Well, I suppose it's and I maybe the parallel of looking at media bias. We saw that over Brexit, which is another immediate example that comes to mind. The other media bias on the other side of the pond is, whatever people think of him, and to say this statement, is that the previous President 45, Donald J. Trump, look at how the media from day one, I mean, the whole thing was to get rid of him as soon as he won the election. Look at how the media behaved, the power of the media. We only have to see the power of the media without going into certain things over the last 3 years. We have to see that. Peter, and we are going to do this again, because the important thing is that you are coming out with facts. You're coming out with historical facts to say this is the right to exist. And the thing that I would like to say, of course, as soon as independence officially then announced, we know that there was fights going on before 1948, building up to that on May the 14th, 1948. But as soon as independence is announced, 5 Arab nations come against to attack Israel. A year of a war and then victory. The war of 1956, Israel didn't start that either. The war of 1973, and then you could say, right, then having to go into Lebanon in 1982. So this whole thing of saying, oh, why do they start this? Why do they start that? No, we have to go into the history of why, and that land, United Nations, etc., is saying, no, this is they have a right to exist. This is their land. They are a country. Just rounding off for the last few minutes, because we look at the court case where South Africa has been used to take Israel into the international court. And again, let's just make a comment when you're referring to Jeremy Corbyn, who I believe was outside that court at one point over the last few weeks. So we're seeing this unfold. We're seeing the warfare, the lawfare unfold, and then the BDS. In regard to America, I just think, personally, Israel just needs to get on with the job. They just need to get on with it. And personally, to ignore, we know what's happened where America has given money to the Iranians and empowered it and all the rest, nuclear, blah, blah, blah. That you and I are going to have that discussion on another day, because this expands history that I think is very, very important. It's very important to put this on the record. It really is. So, Peter, sort of finally then, what do you suggest are the next moves? I suppose the fact that we're out there trying to put the truth out there. What are the next moves?
Well, I can only hope that voices like mine, which are growing, will be sufficiently convincing and express widely enough to an audience that is open-minded. Through people like yourself, through the work I'm doing with Blitz. Don't forget, with Blitz, my articles go to an audience in South Asia. I think the circulation is about 1 to 1.5 million. My articles are published in English, Arabic, and Hindi. So I don't think there's any point in preaching to the converted. There are other people to do that. But I'm just hoping that the people in this country will be, their eyes, I think, have been opened, Mark. I think what they've seen in the last couple of months, their eyes have been opened, and they can see the dangers within, on the streets, in our universities, in our parliament, in our media, etc. And I just think there is a sleeping silent majority that will make its voice heard, which I hope will ensure the safety of Judeo-Christian values in the United Kingdom.
Peter, thank you. I just want to thank you for joining me today. And this is a discussion that I really want to carry on with, because history is really, really important. And we have to put that over. And before someone says history is written by the victors, okay, so that's why we have to go and do deep digging and do research and to put the facts out there. Peter, I'm going to play us out, but if you just very, very quickly, you got 30 seconds, remind us where people can find you again.
Yeah, I'm writing for a magazine called Blitz, and all my articles, you can go on their website and see all my articles. And I'm quite active on Twitter and social media at BAUM_P.
Okay, brilliant. I'm going to play us out. Peter, don't go away. I'll speak to you in a second. But thank you very much for joining us today. And please share this and join this discussion, because this is so important for the where we are at this juxtaposition in regard to civilization. All right. God bless. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Bye.